You know what time it is. Woo! Get into it! Yes! Yes! Get into it! We are back. We are back with Storytime with Chris. Hope everybody is having a wonderful Tuesday. It's a new moon tonight. New chapters, new things begin. And it's a solar eclipse. But unfortunately, here in the U.S., I'm not going to be able to see it because it's on the eastern hemisphere is where the solar eclipse is happening. So, unfortunately, I will not be able to get to see it at its fruition. But I hope everybody is having a good day. So, I'm not going to get super duper close to the mic because it is really powerful at the moment because I turned up the mic gain a bit higher than what I normally would. So you all can hear me. But we are back with Storytime. Of course, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your spare time, between time, downtime, relaxing time. Like, share, and subscribe onto the YouTube channel if you have time. If you have friends that you think would like this or children that you know would like this, welcome to Storytime. Reading is not just fundamental, it is essential. It is important because it teaches you language, teaches you about different cultures, broadens your perspectives, different walks of life, learning about different geographical cities and so on, past and present, or even future for that matter. Yes, reading is a magical place. Alright, we are back. Today is the... Oh, yes. Okay. So today is the 25th of October. So that means we are 6 days away from Halloween, which is on a Monday this year. Which, in my opinion, I mean, obviously holidays change as the years go by. They will land on different days. But I feel like Halloween should always be on a weekend. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. More so Friday and Saturday. Sunday is a bit... You gotta go back to school the following day. I feel like Halloween should definitely be on a weekend, but, you know, I don't make the calendar, so it is what it is. And then considering that, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but Dia de los Muertos is November 1st. It's either November 1st or November 2nd. But Dia de los Muertos is also coming up, so shout out to all of my Latino friends of Mexico who celebrate Dia de los Muertos. Shout out to my sister-in-law and her family, and all of my friends who celebrate and enjoy what is to be a beautiful holiday of reverence from one's ancestors and those who have passed on, and continuing to celebrate those who have come before and those who are still with us. So, yeah. Also, keeping in mind that on the 30th, which is Hallows Eve, and the 31st, I will be reading Ray Bradbury's The Halloween Tree, which is one of my favorite books of all time. It is a story that I typically try to read every Halloween because it's an incredible story that it doesn't extrapolate on just the American aspect of Halloween, in that Halloween is celebrated across the world through different cultures, and it breaks down how they're celebrated. Granted, it's a fantasy children's story, but I think it's just fun to read, and it's spooky. We live for the spookiness at this house. Speaking of which, I still need to buy candy for Halloween. I am lagging. I had to take care of bills, y'all. But it will be done. So if you're in Yellow Springs, if you want to stop by, I'm on High Street. Please come see me. I'll give out the candy to the kiddos. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you then. And wear awesome costumes. And if you don't have a costume and still want candy, that's still fine too. Alright. We are back with the Baudelaire children trying to cook dinner for Count Olaf and his theater troupe. And Count Olaf is quite a nasty person. He doesn't even allow the children to really have fun. There are no books in the house of interest, no toys for Sunny, the little toddler, and Violet is unable to be inspired to invent things. So They've gone over to Justice Strauss, who is the local judge that lives next door to Count Olaf's house, to get a recipe book for puttanesca sauce. It's an Italian dish. So we are going to find out and see what happens next. Chapter 4. The Baudelaire orphans copied the puttanesca recipe from the cookbook onto a piece of scrap paper, and Justice Strauss was kind enough to escort them to the market to buy the necessary ingredients. Count Olaf had not left them very much money, but the children were able to buy everything they needed. From a street vendor, they purchased olives after tasting several varieties and choosing their favorites. At a pasta store, they selected interesting-shaped noodles and asked the woman running the store the proper amount for 13 people. The 10 people Count Olaf mentioned, and the 3 of them. Then at the supermarket, they purchased garlic, which is a sharp-tasting bulbous plant, anchovies, which are small salty fish, capers, which are flower buds of a small shrub and taste marvelous, and tomatoes, or tomatoes, for those who wish to use the other pronunciation, which are actually fruits and not vegetables, as most people believe. They thought it would be proper to serve dessert and brought several envelopes of pudding mix. Perhaps the orphans thought if they made a delicious meal, Count Olaf might be a bit kinder to them. "Thank you so much for helping us out today," Violet said as she and her siblings walked home with Justice Strauss. "I don't know what we would have done without you." "You seem like very intelligent people," Justice Strauss said. "I dare say you would have thought of something. But it continues to strike me as odd that Count Olaf has asked you to prepare such an enormous meal. Well, here we are. I must go inside and put my own groceries away. I hope you children will come over soon and borrow books from my library." "Tomorrow?" Klaus said quickly. "Could we come over tomorrow?" "I don't see why not," Justice Strauss said, smiling. "I can't tell you how much we appreciate this," Violet said carefully. With their kind parents dead and Count Olaf treating them so abominably, the 3 children were not used to kindness from adults and weren't sure if they were expected to do anything back. "Tomorrow, before we use your library again, Klaus and I will be more than happy to do household chores for you. Sunny isn't really old enough to work, but I'm sure we could find some way she can help you." Justice Strauss smiled at the 3 children, but her eyes were sad. She reached out a hand and put it on Violet's hair, and Violet felt more comforted than she had in some time. "That won't be necessary," Justice Strauss said. "You are always welcome in my home." Then she turned away and went to her home, and after a moment of staring after her, the Baudelaire orphans went into theirs. For most of the afternoon, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny cooked the puttanesca sauce according to the recipe. Violet roasted the garlic and washed and chopped the anchovies. Klaus peeled the tomatoes and pitted the olives. Sunny banged on a pot with a wooden spoon and singing a rather repetitive song she had written herself, and all 3 of the children felt less miserable than they had since their arrival at Count Olaf's. The smell of cooking food is often a calming one. The kitchen grew cozy as the sauce simmered, a culinary term which means cooked over low heat. The 3 children spoke of pleasant memories of their parents, and about Justice Strauss, who they agreed was a wonderful neighbor and in whose library they planned to spend a great deal of time. As they talked, they mixed and tasted the chocolate pudding. Just as they were placing the pudding in the refrigerator to cool, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny heard a loud banging sound as the front door was flung open. I'm sure I don't have to tell you who was home. "Orphans?" Count Olaf called out in his scratchy voice. "Where are you, orphans?" "In the kitchen, Count Olaf," Klaus called. "We're just finishing dinner." "You'd better be," Count Olaf said and strode into the kitchen. He gazed at all 3 Baudelaire children with his shiny, shiny eyes. "My troop is right behind me, and they are very hungry. Where is the roast beef?" "We didn't make roast beef," Violet said. "We made puttanesca sauce." "What?" Count Olaf asked. "No roast beef?" "You didn't tell us you wanted roast beef." Count Olaf slid toward the children so that he looked even taller than he was. His eyes grew even brighter, and his one eyebrow raised in anger. In agreeing to adopt you, he said, I have become your father. And as your father, I am not someone to be trifled with. I demand that you serve roast beef to myself and my guests. We don't have any, Violet cried. We made puttanesca sauce. No, 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 Shuddy shouted. Count Olaf looked down at Sunny, who had spoken so suddenly. With an inhuman roar, he picked her up in one scraggly hand and raised her so she was staring at him in the eye. Needless to say, Sunny was very frightened and began crying immediately, too scared to even try to bite the hand that held her. Put her down immediately, you beast! Klaus shouted. He jumped up, trying to rescue Sunny from the grasp of the Count, but he was holding her too high to reach. Count Olaf looked down at Klaus and smiled, a terrible, toothy grin. Raising the wailing Sunny up even higher in the air, he seemed about to drop her to the floor when there was a loud burst of laughter in the next room. Olaf! Where's Olaf? Voices called out. Count Olaf paused, still holding the wailing Sunny up in the air as members of his theater troupe walked into the kitchen. Soon they were crowding the room, an assortment of strange-looking characters of all shapes and sizes. There was a bald man with a very long nose, dressed in a long black robe. There were two women who had bright white powder all over their faces, making them look like ghosts. Behind the women was a man with very long and skinny arms, at the end which were two hooks instead of hands. There was a person who was extremely fat and who looked like neither a man nor a woman. And behind this person, standing in the doorway, were an assortment of people the children could not see, but who promised to be just as frightening. Here you are, Olaf, said one of the white-faced women. What in the world are you doing? I'm just disciplining these orphans, Count Olaf said. I asked them to make dinner, and all they have made is some disgusting sauce. You can't go easy on children, the man with the hooked hand said. They must be taught to obey their elders. The tall, bald man peered at the youngsters. Are these, he said to Count Olaf, those wealthy children you were telling me about? Yes, Count Olaf said. They're so awful I could scarcely stand to touch them. With that he lowered Sunny, who was still wailing, to the floor. Violet and Klaus breathed a sigh of relief that he had not dropped her from that great height. I don't blame you, said someone in the doorway. Count Olaf rubbed his hands together as if he had been holding something revolting instead of an infant. Well, enough talk, he said. I suppose we will eat their dinner, even though it was all wrong. Everyone follow me to the dining room, and I will pour us some wine. Perhaps by the time these brats serve us, we will be too drunk to care if it is roast beef or not. Hooray! Cried several members of the troupe, and they marched through the kitchen, following Count Olaf into the dining room. Nobody paid a bit of attention to the children, except for the bald man who stopped and stared at Violet in the eye. You're a pretty one, he said, taking her face in his rough hands. If I were you, I would try not to anger Count Olaf, or it might wreck that pretty little face of yours. Violet shuddered, and the bald man gave a high-pitched giggle and left the room. The Baudelaire children, alone in the kitchen, found themselves breathing heavily as if they had just run a long distance. Sunny continued to wail, and Klaus found that his eyes were wet with tears as well. Only Violet didn't cry, but merely trembled with fear and revulsion, a word which here means an unpleasant mixture of horror and disgust. For several moments, none of them could speak. This is terrible, terrible, Klaus said finally. Violet, what can we do? I don't know, she said. I'm afraid. Me too, Klaus said. Hush, Sunny said as she stopped crying. Let's have some dinner, someone shouted from the dining room, and the theater troupe began pounding on the table in strict rhythm, which is an exceedingly rude thing to do. You'd better serve the puttanesca, Klaus said, or who knows what Count Olaf will do to us. Violet thought of what the bald man had said about wrecking her face, and nodded. The two of them looked at the pot of bubbling sauce which had seemed so cozy while they were making it now, and now looked like a vat of blood. Then, leaving Sunny behind in the kitchen, they walked into the dining room, Klaus carrying a bowl of the interestingly shaped noodles, and Violet carrying the pot of puttanesca sauce in a large ladle with which to serve it. The theater troupe was talking and cackling, drinking again and again from their wine cups and paying no attention to the Baudelaire orphans as they circled the table, serving everyone dinner. Violet's right hand ached from holding the heavy ladle. She thought of switching to her left hand, but because she was right-handed, she was afraid she might spill the sauce with her left hand. She could enrage out Count Olaf again. She stared miserably at Olaf's plate of food and found herself wishing she had bought poison at the market and put it in the puttanesca sauce. Finally, they were through serving, and Klaus and Violet slipped back into the kitchen. They listened to the wild, rough laughter of Count Olaf and his theater troupe, and they picked at their own portions of food, too miserable to eat. Before long, Olaf's friends were pounding on the table in strict rhythm again, and the orphans went out to the dining room to clear the table, and then again to serve the chocolate pudding. By now it was obvious that Count Olaf and his associates had had a great deal of wine, and they slouched at the table and spoke much less. Finally, they roused themselves and trooped back into the kitchen, scarcely glancing at the children on their way out of the house. Count Olaf looked around the room, which was filled with dirty dishes. "Because you haven't cleaned up yet," he said to the orphans, "I suppose you could be excused from attending tonight's performance. But after cleaning up, you are to go straight to your beds." Klaus had been glaring at the floor, trying to hide how upset he was, but at this he could not remain silent. "You mean our bed," he shouted. "You've only provided us with one bed." Members of the theater troupe stopped in their tracks at this outburst and glanced from Klaus to Count Olaf to see what would happen next. Count Olaf raised one eyebrow, and his eyes shone bright, but he spoke calmly. "If you would like another bed," he said, "tomorrow you may go into town and purchase one." "You know perfectly well we haven't any money," Klaus said. "Of course you do," and his voice began to get a little louder. "You are the inheritors of an enormous fortune." "That money," Klaus said, remembering what Mr. Poe said, "is not to be used until Violet is of age." Count Olaf's face grew very red. For a moment he said nothing. Then in one sudden movement he reached down and struck Klaus across the face. Klaus fell to the floor, his face inches from the eye tattoo on Olaf's ankle. His glasses leapt from his face and skittered into a corner. His left cheek, where Olaf had struck him, felt as if it were on fire. The theater troupe laughed, and a few of them applauded as if Count Olaf had done something very brave instead of something despicable. "Come on, friends," Count Olaf said to his comrades. "We'll be late for our own performance." "If I know you, Olaf," said the man with the hook hands, "you'll figure out a way to get at that Baudelaire money." "We'll see," Count Olaf said, but his eyes were shining as bright as if he had already had an idea. There was another loud boom as the front door shut behind Count Olaf and his terrible friends, and the Baudelaire children were alone in the kitchen. Violet knelt at Klaus's side, giving him a hug to try to make him feel better. Sunny crawled over to his glasses, picked them up, and brought them to him. Klaus began to sob, not so much from the pain, but from the rage at the terrible situation they were in. Violet and Sunny cried with him, and they continued weeping as they washed the dishes, and as they blew out the candles in the dining room, and as they changed out of their clothes and lay down to go to sleep. Klaus in the bed, Violet on the floor, Sunny on her little cushion of curtains. Moonlight shone through the window, and if anyone had looked into the Baudelaire orphan's bedroom, they would have seen 3 children crying quietly all night long. And that is where we will end for today. I love this series for a couple of reasons. I love the series of unfortunate events because it reiterates the idea that life, even though this is a mystery story, it's a fantasy, life in and of itself will present you with challenge. Not every child in the world has an easy life. Stories like this teach us an important lesson, that we should appreciate what we have, that what we do have can be taken from us. and that not every child may live a happy life. And so it's on us as people to go out of our way to be consistent about showing kindness, genuine compassion and kindness, no matter if you know this person or if they're your friend or if they're somebody from school. If you see that somebody is suffering, show them love and kindness, and don't expect anything in return. Because if you do stuff for viral sensationalism or because you want to be seen or get a reward, kind of loses the magic of what it means to do something for others rather than just doing for yourself. So, live for others, not just yourself. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.